The galaxy had not witnessed a war like this in ages. For centuries, the mighty empires of the stars clashed, exchanging worlds as if they were coin, waging battles bound by codes, by rules, by restraint. But then came their mistake-striking Earth. None had ever imagined humanity as a true danger. Earth was dismissed as a forgotten backwater, primitive by galactic measure. The Dominion, a vast empire ruled by the cold-blooded Zellery overlords, saw the planet as nothing more than a simple conquest, perhaps even a proving ground for their young warriors. Their fleets descended upon the blue world in shining armadas. They expected surrender. What they found was hell. The opening days were chaos. Humanity, fractured and unready, bled under impossible losses. Cities burned from orbit, entire populations erased in an instant. The Zari mocked the pitiful resistance, their soldiers parading through the ashes of human life, convinced victory was certain. But humanity shifted. Survival alone was not enough, and surrender was unthinkable. The war became something else, something monstrous. Humanity refused to die quietly. They unleashed weapons the galaxy had never witnessed, waging war without codes, without honor, without restraint. The Dominion had come for a contest of empires. What they received was annihilation. Earth's fighters turned to guerrilla war, every trick, every trap, every ounce of desperation clawing back their home. And when they mastered space, when they adapted, when they evolved, they could not be contained. The first great victory came with the capture of a Zari warship. No one knew how the ragged survivors managed it, only that they stormed the vessel. Like demons ripping through the alien crew with bare hands when their weapons failed. From then, the war spread to the stars. The galaxy recoiled in dread as the tide shifted. Human ships, swift and merciless, carved deep into Dominion space. Worlds that had never known invasion burned as Earth avenged its fallen. The Zari, once proud conquerors, now fled in fear at the sight of human banners. But this was no longer war. It had become something far darker, personal. Humanity did not just conquer, they destroyed without pause. Entire species allied with the Dominion were erased, civilizations reduced to ash. The gentle races of the stars pleaded for mercy, begged Earth to stop, but humanity had no mercy left to give. The war raged on. The galaxy trembled, and humanity, once the weakling, now stood as the monster in the dark. This was no longer survival, this was vengeance, and it had only just begun. The Dominion's desperate retreat shattered the illusion of their invincibility. Once the most feared empire in the stars, with banners flying over thousands of conquered worlds, now their fleets burned in the void, their generals slain, their worlds falling one by one. Yet the horror wasn't only in humanity's victories, it was in how they fought. The Dominion had always conquered with arrogance. They enslaved, they ruled, but they never erased. Their wars ended with surrender, with new rulers on old thrones. Humanity had no such intent. The first footage of the turning tide came from the fall of Vorsk 9, a Dominion stronghold for centuries. Elite soldiers, once ruthless, cowered as human warships descended. There was no declaration, no warning, the sky erupted in fire. No ground invasion came, no prisoners were taken. The humans bombed the planet until the crust boiled, until seas became vapor, until not a single Zari survived. Then they moved on. World after world burned the same way. Dominion soldiers abandoned their posts, laying down arms in surrender, praying for the mercy humanity had once cherished. But mercy had died on Earth. The few survivors who fled spoke of nightmares, human ground troops who weren't soldiers, but executioners. They fought not for honor, not for victory, but for extermination. Zari colonies, untouched by war, were slaughtered all the same. Cities crumbled, civilians butchered. Refugees whispered of human warriors draped in bones, of laughter echoing across ruins. The other empires watched in horror. For centuries they had dismissed humanity as fragile. Now they knew the truth. The Dominion's Grand Council, once arrogant, sat drowned in fear. Their leader, Supreme Chancellor Vuor, stared hollow-eyed. "They will not stop," whispered a minister. "We must surrender. Offer them the empire." Vio shook his head, voice broken. "You think they seek surrender? They want no throne, no peace, no rule." He turned toward the projection of their capital world, now only fire and bone. "They want us dead." So the Dominion prepared for its final stand. Distress calls rang out across the stars, begging aid. Some empires considered stepping in, but fear shackled them. If the mightiest empire had fallen before humanity, what chance had they? One by one, they stayed silent. Humanity's name spread not as curiosity, but as terror. A species that once dreamed of the stars had become the galaxy's greatest nightmare. And the war was not over. The last strongholds of the Dominion quaked as humanity's fleet drew near. Humanity pushed deeper into Dominion space. There was no slowing, no hesitation. Every Zari world was burning or already reduced to dust. The other empires of the stars stayed frozen, watching from the shadows. They whispered in secret, debating intervention, but none dared act. They had seen the truth. Those who stood against humanity did not survive. The Dominion had been arrogant, mighty beyond measure. Yet now their fleets drifted as wreckage in the void. The final battle gathered above Zeller Prime. Once the proud heart of the Dominion, the cradle of Zari supremacy, now it was a planet drowning in fear. Its grand cities were stuffed with refugees, the remnants of a species teetering on extinction. The skies above seethed with defenses hastily assembled barricades. Ancient warships pulled from distant borders, but every soul knew the truth. Nothing could stop what was coming. The human fleet arrived without ceremony. No declaration, no demands. The galaxy already understood humanity no longer spoke. They killed. Zari warships, once terrors of the stars, disintegrated in moments. They unleashed every weapon in their arsenal: plasma lances, dark matter torpedoes, planet-killer warheads, but it didn't matter. The humans had adapted, sharpened by every loss, refined by every victory. What had once been crude ships of steel and fire had become predators of precision and death. Within hours the Zari fleet was gone. Then the slaughter began. On the surface, Zari warriors fought with despair and fury, knowing there was nowhere left to run. They fought harder than ever before. But humanity moved like shadows and fire. Their armored soldiers tore through barricades like an unstoppable plague. For every human that fell, 10 Zari died. Civilians fled in terror. Mothers clutched children. Elders prayed to gods that had already abandoned them. Some whispered that surrender might still save them. But mercy had died on Earth. The final hours of Zeller Prime were not a battle, they were an execution. Humanity spread through its cities like wildfire, leaving nothing untouched. The royal palace, a monument of Zari dominance for millennia, collapsed in flames. And then it ended. The last Zari signal faded into silence. The Dominion was no more, but the silence was not relief. It was terror. The galaxy understood. Humanity had not merely won the war, they had become the war. The fractured species that once bickered over borders now stood united by a single purpose. The rage that had fueled them through Earth's destruction had not dimmed, it burned hotter still. And with the Dominion gone, a darker question lingered. Who was next? Across the stars, empires scrambled to send desperate messages, pleading for talks, praying for mercy. But deep down, they all knew. Humanity had tasted vengeance, and they were not finished. The quiet after Zeller Prime was unlike any calm the galaxy had ever known. It was not peace. It was the stillness of something unnatural, something worse than war. The ruins of Zeller Prime smoldered beneath its dying sun. Cities reduced to ash, its people erased from existence. No survivors, no prisoners, no negotiations. Only a message carved into the bones of a dead empire. Humanity was finished being prey. Now they were the predator. Across the galaxy, ancient rulers and mighty empires whispered the same fearful question: would humanity stop here, or would they set their gaze on the rest of the stars? Galaxy desperate to prevent their own destruction. The most powerful and pyrescent envoys to humanity's new high command. Pleas for peace, offers offalliances, promises of reparations in a thing to avoid the fate of the Dominion. The response from humanity came days later, a single transmission, 3 words. We air watching. It was not a declaration of peace. It was a warning. The galaxy scrambled to interpret the message. Did it mean humanity was satisfied with their vengeance? Would they stand down? Oh, that their greatest enemy was Gonir. Was this just the beginning? No one knew, and that uncertainty was the most terrifying thing of all. Fall, as the galaxy held its breath, reports began to emerge of something even worse. Human warships have been sighted far beyond Dominion space, deep in uncharted territories. They moved without transmitting signals, without declaring their purpose. They were ghosts in Thevoid, appearing at the edges of different empires' borders before vanishing, just as quickly at first. The sightings were dismissed as paranoia, but then ships started going missing. At first, it was only small scout vessels, then entire convoys vanished without a trace. Military outposts along the farthest reaches of the galactic core went silent. No distress signals, no debris fields, just gone, and the messages began. Distorted transmissions filled the emergency channels of every major empire. Their signals twisted and broken beyond known interfering anticipation. Trade routes were abandoned. Fleets no longer patrolled their borders, but hid within them the great empires off the stars. Races that had conquered whole sectors, that had ruled without challenge for millennia, no longer spoke in terms of power. Now they whispered only in fear. And then the disappearances began. Entire warships began vanishing from the void. At first it was small vessels, scout supply freighter outposts, and the farthest reaches of known space. There was no distress signal, no warning. Just silence, the kind of silence the human had left behind on Zillar Prime. Then the larger ships began to vanish. Battleships, carriers, flagships, awful armadas, entire fleets disappearing. Without a trace. It was never in the heart of any empire, never an outright attack. Number. Humanity was patient. They were hunting. The first message came from the Tian Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their fleet of force that had once brought entire star systems to their knees had been reduced to scattered fragments of debris. A lone escape pod drifted into Theteran homeworld's orbit, its occupant barely clinging to life. Transmission they recovered was garbled, broken, filled with static, but a voice they understood perfectly. You sat and watched as they burned us. Now we will watch as you. Full panic spread like wildfire. The Turan government collapsed within days. Their colonies, once loyal and strong, revolted before humanity even reached them. They rendered to the ghosts in Thevoid before the first human warship even appeared. And then just like that, the humans were gone. No invasion, no occupation, just silence. It was the beginning of a new era, one that no one had foreseen. Races that had stood at the peak of the galactic order began to flee their own homes. Worlds that had been inhabited for thousands of years were abandoned at overnight. Night. Entire civilizations packed their people into colony ships and sent them into the unknown, hoping to escape the gaze of Earth's wrath. But there was no escaping. The humans were everywhere, not in grand fleets, not in armadas that blotted out the stars. Nothing moved like whispers. In the dark, their ships appearing only long enough to remind the galaxy of their presence. Left no demands, no rules to follow, no ultimatums to obey, only fear. And fear was enough. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was at peace, not by diplomacy, not by treaties, by terror. Where once there had been border conflicts, there was now a retreat. Where once mighty warlords sought conquest, there was only hesitation. No one wanted to risk drawing humanity's attention. The stars had come quiet, no war, no conflict, because in the darkness, in the endless void of space, the name of humanity was whispered with dread. They had been underestimated, they had been attacked, they had suffered, and no, now they were watching, and the galaxy would never know peace again.